And welcome back to post-game content. Whew. It feels good to shake off these cobwebs a little bit. I'll tell you what. How are you feeling? I am joined yet again by my co-host Michael. Michael, how you doing?
I'm all right. It has been a while. It's like there's at least an episode every month as promised, but it's just like when it happens, it's kind of ethereal. But
post-game content, baby. Do we overpromise? No. Do we underpromise? Also no.
Do we over-deliver? Almost never.
Fucking absolutely not.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, it's just been, there's just a lot of life things happening. And I'm, for you, there's also been a lot of life things happening. So we just had
there are happenings.
Roll with the punches here. Yeah. And you know what, listener, it's none of your business. You're just going to have to deal with that. So
guess what? You get us for like 3 hours every month, and that's what you get.
If you're in the Discord, you could likely pick up on some of the context occasionally. But yeah, we just kind of do what we need to do. You all got 2 free video games, $120 in video games. So deal with it. That's your olive branch. So
also congratulations, and to the rest of our listeners, we love you a
lot. Yeah, they had, I forget which order it was, but one of Darth Egg won. Yeah, Darth Egg won Last of Us, and Ham Sandwich won Dead Space, and they were like, "What if we swapped instead?" And I don't have the energy nor the time to give a shit. So I was like, yeah, that's totally fine. Whatever.
Sure. Fine.
It cost me nothing. So, because I promise you, if it had taken any effort to swap them, I wouldn't have done it, because that's how little effort I put into this type of thing.
We're coming in hot right out of the gate. Just fuck
oh my God,
you for expecting
you
more
want
of
a free
us.
video game. What more do you want? Oh, man.
So we're recording this right on the eve of the Resident Evil 4 remake coming out, which I assume is the reason that you're still alive and hanging on with us.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Like I mentioned before we started actually recording, I got plenty of sleep last night, and I anticipate that holding me over for my however late I stay up tonight, because according to Steam, it drops at midnight. So, we'll see if that actually like happens tonight, or if I spend the majority of my day tomorrow playing it. So we'll see. But yeah, it looks really good. Did you get the chance to play through the demo?
I still haven't. I've been meaning to do that, and I'm trying to balance out my weekend between remake and also going through the Diablo 4 beta, which is coming out, I think, on Saturday. I am.
Yes, go ahead.
Very curious about that.
I watched some streams of the Diablo 4 beta, and it looks pretty good. I'm one of the few that like I liked the mechanics of 2, but I liked how easily 3 played. Like, because 2 was much more hardcore than 3 was, and that's fine. Like, I just think they're just 2 separate games. They're not sequels. They're just 2 separate things.
I think that's a good way to think about them.
Yeah, for sure. Because I liked 3 more because it was much more accessible and easy for me to just mindlessly play. And 4 felt like that to me, but it also felt a little more catered to the hardcore crowd, which is fine as long as it's accessible at first. And it felt like that from what I watched people play of it. So I'm excited to give it a shot.
There's probably a good middle ground to be found there, where it felt like in Diablo 3, my choices and the skills that I invested in just didn't matter. I was going to make it through no matter what I threw at the wall. And Diablo 2, it feels like you could very easily just stick yourself if you didn't wisely invest your points. Yeah. There's probably a middle ground, and I'm hopeful that Diablo 4 finds it.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, like, it wasn't until like my 4th playthrough of Diablo 3. Yes, I did 4 playthroughs. We put a lot of hours into that game back in the day. But like until we actually like scaled the difficulty, because there's like what 9 difficulties in that game or something.
Yeah, it's a ton.
But like up in the upper echelon of difficulties, did it actually get challenging? So, but yeah, I'm excited to see what the future brings with Diablo. But Resident Evil 4 remake, no sense I'm playing the demo now, Max. You're like right there. Like, by the time this releases, it's already out. So
that's a good point. Yeah. Look, I'll just end up buying it and playing through it, and I don't know. That'll end up being an episode, I'm sure.
At some point, I'm sure. Yeah. Maybe if we want to get. Go ahead.
That's not the episode we have tonight, is it?
Sure isn't. Thank God.
Nope. Tonight we are covering a game called Returnal, and I have to give you credit, Michael, for putting me onto this game, because I think this would probably be one that I would have missed had you not talked to me about it ahead of time. Because you played it when it originally released on the PS5, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. And so when it came to PC, it was kind of a quiet fanfare. It feels like it didn't get a lot of the hype that I was really expecting. Mm-hmm. And so I probably would have missed out on it, and would have missed out on a legitimately fantastic game.
Yeah, I was really lucky to have played this game, because I had originally bought a PlayStation 5 way back in the day for Demon Souls. And then a friend of mine, I hadn't touched it since. And then I was like, yeah, this thing's just kind of collecting dust. And then a friend of mine who had actually got it through, he actually ended up getting 2 of them. He's like, hey, my nephews are looking for one for Christmas. They were really hard to find. He's like, can I just buy, if you're not going to use it, can I just buy it back off of you for the, for retail? I was like, yeah, man, like that's totally fun for the kids, whatever. So I didn't have one. And then he had actually picked up Returnal, and this is Justin out there if you're listening, talking about you. He had Returnal, and then he was gone away for a weekend, and he let me borrow his PlayStation 5. He's like, you've got to try this game. And dude, I was hooked instantly. I mean, this game is like made for me, like everything about it. And I think that's actually like part of the reason this game has flown so low, like below the radar. It's because everything about this game, if you try to describe it, like falls into these genres that are all extremely saturated. And like the marketing for it doesn't do it any favors, but there isn't another way to market it. It's like, oh, it's a roguelite. Oh, it's an action shooter. It's a bullet hell. Like all of those have like their own niches that are well above, like on their own successful, and no one's going to stray away from like the top 5s in each of those categories. But
sure,
this deserves a shot, because it is all of those things, yet none of those things at the same time.
I think that's a great point, is that Returnal sort of exists sort of within those spaces where, like, is it a roguelike? Yes, kinda, but it's not put together in the same way that I think a lot of other roguelikes are. Is it a bullet hell? Kinda, but it's not put together in the same way that I think a lot of other bullet hells are. It sort of has found its own sort of niche somewhere in between those genres, which can, you're right, make it a tough sell for somebody who's goes in with a sort of set expectation of what this game is going to play like. But I think a lot of that disappears the minute you get your hands on the controller and just feel how intuitive and fun it is to control Celine. To sort of get a sense of how responsive and how fast the game is.
Yes.
That I think is one of the major selling, or at least for me, like in the first few minutes of the game was something that really sold me on it, of like, oh, okay. So I'm not fighting a lot of controls here. And I think that makes you own a lot more of your mistakes as you get into the game, because you have so much fluidity and so much movement. And you're so fast. When you fuck up, generally, it's pretty obvious how you fucked up.
Yeah, for sure. That's like one of my favorite things about this game right out of the gate was just how accessible the control scheme was, like you had mentioned,
Mhm.
because like I just instantly felt like I had control of Celine, like in the second room. Like I was like, yep, I know every single mechanic already. Like
Yeah.
it's just you just click so fast with this. And like it's hard, it's tough because like whenever you talk about like controls for a game, it's not really something that how well they stick. It's hard to put into words. But I guess the best way to describe it is I'll talk about the plot of the game here a little bit. I feel like whenever they developed the controls for this game, they put a lot of time and effort into making it feel so natural because as this game had the roguelite element of this game is that Celine wakes up on this planet, and then as she's moving through this planet, she's finding these like corpses that look like exactly like her and these audio logs of her talking, and she's like, what the hell is going on? And then she starts to realize that she's in this cycle. So even at the beginning of this game, Celine is not like this is not the first time being on this alien planet. It is part of you're dead in the middle of her trying to discover what this cycle is. You don't even know how many times she's died and come back. So natively right out of the gate, there's no like hardcore tutorial. Like the game utilizes very easy to grasp mechanics, like very fluid, like tap the stick to or tap the stick to run faster, X to jump, like very easy control schemes. Because I think the fact is that Celine would have known how to do all those instinctual things, just like you would
Yeah.
instinctually know how to make those movements and do those things.
And that's something that oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I think that's something that I really appreciate about this game is that a lot of the core mechanics, like you were talking about, like the narrative, are all sort of informed by this gameplay concept of the loop. It's dedicated to being a roguelike and understanding that a roguelike is inherently cyclical and okay, what kind of story does that allow us to tell? Which means that the narrative in Returnal doesn't play out like a lot of other video games, which I could understand being difficult and sort of controversial for a lot of people who go in looking for a sort of more traditional A to B kind of story, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Returnal doesn't do that and doesn't ever try to do that. I platinumed this game. I went through every piece of content that was humanly possible to get through in this game. And guess
You're
what?
such a monster.
I don't have any fucking idea what's going on, and neither does anybody else, and that's fine.
I do like that about the game, that the majority of the plot is open to like this vast interpretation, because there's like the game stacks the story on itself. Like it's very layered. There's like this there's like what you can see, then there's what Celine feels, and then there's like this weird mesh in between where the game like it overlaps on itself, like the 20th century quote unquote 20th century home or house, like it's in the middle of this like alien planet, is like the crux of where like the story intersects with the gameplay. And it feels out of place. It's supposed to feel out of place. And it literally changes how you play the game. It turns into like a first person horror game when you walk inside.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just completely intentional, is because they want that part of the game to feel entirely separate. And even if you wander into the Tower of Sisyphus, where the story ends up continuing in a sense, that theme continues. Your cyclical pattern of going up the tower, but at the base of the tower, depending on how much progression you get, there's things that are unlocked. And I love how like there's the base, I'm on the planet, I'm trying to escape, and then whatever happened on Earth, and then there's like that weird mixture of the two. I think it's very well done.
Yeah.
Because you lean one direction too far in either direction, the balance is off, and then it becomes all about one thing, and then everyone's just like, well, what was that? So
Yeah.
it's a balance, and I think they really nailed it.
Just to put it in plain terms for people who haven't played the game, like Michael was saying, the plot that you play through in the game is uh, uh, you play as Celine, who crash lands on a planet, realizes that she's stuck in a time loop there, where every time she dies, she returns to the site of the crash and has to try to escape the planet again and again and again. On In the course of exploring this planet, she finds either a replica or it might be her actual house that she grew up in. And when you enter that house, it changes to a first-person view and becomes almost like a walking simulator. And that's where a lot of the story beats come from. There's also a astronaut that is apparently stalking her throughout the game, and can be seen in some pivotal cutscenes and also during gameplay at times if you're looking in the right direction.
Which is super weird, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, it's fucked up and very strange. Is there anything that you came away from the story? Like, I don't know, any like big takeaways that you feel like you had or felt like at some point you had a grip on it?
I think it's misleading in a way. I think the story wants you to think that the astronaut is Celine, but I also think there's compelling evidence that like it could also be her mother. And
Yeah.
because you ultimately play as the child as well in the house, so it's very like I said, it's up to interpretation depending on how you look at the events and how they play out. And I won't jump into like any of the key points, but the story itself is like really, it's just a story about loneliness and abandonment. Like those are the key like takeaway points regardless of who's who. But I really think there's a story of loss in there somewhere tied really deeply. But I don't think you really get that like key element, or at least that cemented element, until like the true ending of the game.
I'm glad you said that, because when I was writing my notes, one of the things that I said was that I think this is a story that is about trauma. And I think, I'm not sure if we're supposed to interpret the events on the planet of Atropos as literal. But I think it is a story about the sort of cyclical nature of trauma, of Celine trying to process this accident where she lost her mom, and her being kind of stuck in a loop of feeling guilt and blame and trying to work through it. I'm still trying to piece together how I feel about this story, because you're right. It is so much up for interpretations, and there are so many strong sort of symbols, like the astronaut, like the house, like the hospital in the Tower of Sisyphus, that clearly have a whole bunch of meaning, but you sort of bring your own meaning to it when you play the game, which I think is something that not a lot of other video games do that often.
Yeah, I've 100%. There are some like, there's some key points that like lead me to believe that it's the mother, and then there's a key points that make me think it's the child too. And one of the like, for instance, like I think it was Octo is the name of the little octopus that she finds, the little plush toy, and then like all the enemies in the game have these weird like tentacles. And it's like, there's some projection there. Then there's the weird painting on the wall that has like the red lights that some of the enemies have like embedded in their face. But like also there's the whole like the answering machine also had like a beating red light on it, which was like the answering machine was pivotal because it had like that message that was like, hey, I'm working late again. I'm not going to be there for you again. So like that beating red light was like a constant reminder to the child that like, there's a message on there for me that likely just says I'm alone without my mom again. And
Right.
then in in the room, whenever you're making, like, you get in the microwave and there's the beating red light in the microwave, like those reoccurring like red lights that were always only in enemies that were very strong and could beat the crap out of you, like without just being like the normal easy enemies, easy objects to overcome, like finding your toy that happened to be like the octopus creatures. I think there's a lot of symbolism that the game instills in those little tiny things as you're moving through.
I really like that reading. So I hadn't thought about that, how it relates to the answering machine, but you go back to that answering machine a few times in those house sequences, and that is that red light. I really like that.
Yeah, and that, I think it's just a testament to like how well the game is structured with like some of the other elements, but there's a lot of other things that were really on the nose that I didn't understand. Like the blocks that you pick up and they like turn to like goo. I have no idea what that means or what that even was or anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. And maybe the interpretation was like one, it was like the sequence. You go in there and you pick that up and it like sparks like a different sequence, but also, you know, like, is that like the reality breaking moment to where like you pick that up and then it turns into this other thing? Is it like a semblance of like her sanity cracking in those memories and like back to reality kind of thing? Like,
Oop,
I don't
there
know.
goes gravity.
What is it?
Nothing. Never mind.
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I'm glad you said that, because I had the same thought about the astronaut, and I thought it was really interesting in a couple of voice clips, I think, and a couple of the text logs that you can find. You can see that Celine's mother had aspirations to be an astronaut. And if, you know, her experience on Atropos is more of like a mental state of her trying to process losing her mom, you know, this sort of hyper realistic version of the astronaut that Celine is pretending to be, sort of stalking her and sort of being in like the corner of her vision the entire time, sort of reminding her that like this isn't real, might be that was sort of my reading of it. Was, you know, one, the guilt that she feels about losing her mom, which I think she feels responsible for the crash that ended up taking her life, and two, just sort of it calls into such a stark contrast the sort of science fiction of Celine's astronaut suit in stark contrast against the hyper realistic astronaut that is pursuing her.
Yeah, and I think like that's so cool, because I hadn't even looked at it like that, and this is why I love this game so much, because of the story interpretations. But
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
and the way I had looked at it was like the astronaut was a symbol. If you found an astronaut suit, it was like it granted you an extra life, essentially. So I thought there was a lot of cool symbolism there, because in like the car crash where she's the astronaut in the road, there's still no definitive answer whether or not that person driving, who looks a lot like Celine, was actually Celine's mother, just because they look alike, or if it's actually Celine and the other kid in there. Because I think in the second ending, whenever she's going down, she goes up and talks about how she lost Helios. Is that her son?
Right.
Like, is that her, like, what? Like, I don't have
Yeah.
any clue what it actually is. But if it's the other way around, to where it's the daughter, the astronaut being the one symbol that she looks up to, that like she feels like she has to, that breathes life into her, being her mother, and then she actually gets time with that, and that gives her like her life back. That's what she wants. So when she finds that astronaut, which is symbolic, because when she's like sitting down, it broke my freaking heart whenever she's sitting down at like the breakfast table and like pouring cereal
With the astronaut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she's like, look at what I did. And the astronaut just kind of sits there, and it's like, I hate that. Like, if you're out there and you're listening and you're an absentee parent, like, go away.
Listen,
Get out of here.
Listen up, fucker. If you're an astronaut listening to this podcast, go fuck yourself.
That too. I said absentee parent, but that's also
I'm
fuck
talking
astronauts
specifically
too.
about astronauts.
No, there's honestly too much to tackle in the game. And again, there's no definitive interpretation. So like,
No, definitely not. But this is the sort of conversation that I was excited to go into about this game, because there's so much that is like, the game signposts things that are clearly meaningful to it, but sort of leaves it open to interpretation for what those meanings are, which gives players, I think, a lot of leeway to sort of construct their own narrative about what has happened. And you're right, the game doesn't necessarily bill itself that way, and I kind of wish that it did signpost that more, because it's much more artsy than it lets on.
oh yeah,
Especially in terms of gameplay, because this is, not a artsy, Euro-driven sort of indie gameplay. This is a full-on like arcade shooter.
oh yeah, tough one too. Like, it is cool how like every time I ran through this game and the multiple runs that it took me the first time, like there would just be runs that it would be like I would just get owned in the first section. Like I'd be like, what is happening? And then I'd get all the way to like section 4, because you almost have to replay the whole run. Like unless you're in like zone 5, like you almost have to rerun the whole thing, because you got to build up the your health and whatnot. But
Yeah, that's true.
now there's a lot. Like I had like the idea was the car crash being like that pivotal moment to where like you sink down, there's like that tentacle thing that like pulls you under, and then the red light, and then it was in my head that has to be her. She obviously, I think she survives that. Like I think she
Yes.
survives the occurrence, obviously, but the rest of the game is her dealing with like that journey of dealing with the trauma that she was the only one that survived that. And then the whole portion of the game where when you wake or when you go to the Tower of Sisyphus, where she's climbing like an endless battle, I think that signifies the therapy that she's attempting to go through. It's digging layer after layer after layer, and then she encounters something that's like feels immovable, and then she eventually defeats it, but it still puts this like permanent damage on her, because every time you beat a boss on that 20th floor, you get hit with a permanent malfunction to where you have. So I think that's symbolic of the fact that while you may have defeated this and moved past this one thing that we're trying to tackle, that doesn't mean that you're permanently healed. There's still things that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. And then it gets harder as you go. Every room is tougher, and then you get up to the next thing that you have to tear through, and it's like twice as hard of what you thought. You didn't think it could get any harder. And again, 3 times as hard, 4 times as hard. So I think that's like, it's really beautiful in a way of signifying like her journey through that. And every time you get down on that first floor and go back to like the hospital or, the maybe the asylum or whatever that she's actually in, I think that's probably a little bit more on the nose, I think, than the other story. But like, it's really cool because when you have a rogue, having like an endless tower is like, come on, everyone wants that. You want to see how high you can get. But I think it's cool how they implemented that and then tied it into the story about trauma. Whether that's intentional or not, that's definitely the takeaway I took from it, the whole therapy approach.
No, I think that's probably true. My interpretation of the game is that you're playing still as like Celine as a child, and this is sort of her visualization of like how to overcome trauma. There's a couple of times like in the house sequence where you see her playing video games, or she clearly has an obsession with space. And this seems like the kind of story that she would create in order to try to like overcome shit in her life. that's why I think the game feels so arcadey and sort of video gamey, because it is, and why it's so at odds with the very realistic sort of story. Because like, if you're trying to take the story literally, this time like makes no fucking sense, right? Like, Celine grew up in like a 20th, like she's our age effectively, or she grew up in like a house that looks like yours or mine. There's no fucking way when she hits 40 that she's like intergalactic travel and shit, like
Right,
that dog don't hunt. So I think that you have to sort of look at it as sort of a journey inward for her, and sort of metaphorical for what she's going through. So I think, yeah, seeing that sort of thing as her dealing with trauma, I thought was an interesting way to tackle this story.
It kind of has like a multiverse kind of aspect to it, because when she swerves to miss the astronaut and then goes off the bridge, that astronaut character, do you think there's an implication that there's, before even that there's some type of mental trauma, like, or do you think maybe that's like she's going crazy, or do you think that's,
I think that's,
go ahead.
I think that's guilt. I think for whatever reason, earned or not, because I think clearly the relationship that Celine has with her mom is fraught, and her mom put a whole bunch of pressure on her, and Celine acted against that. Earned or not, she feels responsible for that car crash that happened with her mom. And so when she's imagining herself as like this far future astronaut, she's sort of taking on a bit of the blame just in that sort of like mental image of herself. Is how I've read this. And again, asterisk on all this shit, because like there is nothing but interpretations in this.
Yeah. Because like my interpretation was that was her son in the car.
Yeah. And I thought, by the way, I very much thought that's where this story was heading. Was that like, Celine's her own mom or some shit like that? It's like, or it's her mom from another time loop or some shit like that.
Yeah, my interpretation of that was that it was her. It was her, but it was, she had such pent up like aggression, and she was so upset. And then the song came on the radio, and that's when it triggered something in her, like this emotional trauma. And then she saw the astronaut, who was all the abandonment that her mother had put on her, trying to be there for her child. And then it caused her like to have a panic attack, and she swerved off the road. And then whenever she swims away from the crash and survives, but her son doesn't, the reason I think that is because there's that flashing message throughout you find that says Helios abandoned. And no one says anything about Helios or who it is or anything, but we do hear her yelling and gasping the name Helios like it's something like she misses and desires and wants like so badly.
Right.
And so I think that like, I think all of these things happen. I think there's trauma with the mom.
Now that is interesting.
And again, like the game is open to interpretation. There is no clear cut answer unless House Marquee has come out and given us one. So I don't know. Definitely worth, I want to hear what other people think too that have played through this game. I don't know of anyone else that's beaten it personally, but if you're out there, please join the Discord and talk about it.
Yeah, please
I just
explain
spent,
to
like,
Michael
2 hours
and I.
restructuring it today.
What the fuck is going on? We're both scared.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it was cool because like the game is designed to keep you focused on the gameplay for sure. Like this game has enough to keep you interested there without even paying mind to the fact that it has a story. And I really think it doesn't even want you to pay attention to it at all until near the end of the game. And if they did, they would have added Act 2 as maybe new areas. Because now it's like, okay, this is just slightly different. And now we're going to start putting more story stuff in here. It's not different enough for you to not know where you're going or what you're doing, but just enough for you to feel comfortable while you're playing it. It'd be a little different. And now you can focus on something a little new.
I appreciated that, I think. I was initially annoyed because there really are like 3 environments in the game, but 2 of them are or all 3 of them are sort of redressed again for Act 2. But I sort of appreciated the fact that it felt like a monumental amount of time had passed between Act 1 and Act 2.
Yes.
Which sort of fed into this sort of, eternal sort of loop that Celine is caught in. The difference between Act 1 and Act 4 isn't crazy, like the forest. But when you get into going back to the mountain again, I thought that was a really interesting design choice. I really enjoyed that.
Every level in this game like screamed personality. Like I don't know, there's so much influence from so many different types of or corners of I don't know, I don't even know what the word would be, I guess cultural references. There's a little bit of Lovecraft in here. There's a little bit of I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. But the point is every area is dripping with its own sense of personality. The stark contrast between each of them too is what's cool. It's you're going from this rundown jungle ruins area, and then you step to the portal and it's boom, you are in a red desert wasteland with not a tree or plant in sight. Oh, by the way, now all the monsters fly, get fucked. So it's really cool how it gives you the ability to every environment. Celine is just feels so natural to control her in, and I feel like that was the choice made for those things. It's all right, here you have these, the first area has these tight cut corners and a lot of ability to dodge and move and run and have be more precise with your movements. And it's all right, now we're going to put you out in open space and force you to have larger rooms and be actually more accurate and controlled in what you're doing.
And that, by the way, that move into a more open space is really what I would consider that to be my all-in moment, was going to the Crimson Ways for the first times, because I didn't realize that kind of design could work in a roguelike. In a rogue game, generally, everything is procedurally generated rooms where, there may be one sort of format, but it's connected by doors to other rooms, and those are randomly generated. In the Crimson Waste, it's all just kind of laid out, and you don't even need to move from door to door to go to these different areas. You can run between them without touching a door. It really made it feel like this big desert expanse, which sort of sold it to me as an actual place rather than just a roguelike with a desert setting or theme to the different rooms,
Yeah, for sure. And I like how that transition happens too, because even though you're playing the game and you're going from quote unquote zone to zone, it very much feels like you're climbing a mountain the entire time. Everything feels like you're scaling some type of pivotal moment, which I think again is intentional, thinking back to the story, how it's very, it's very filled with trauma, but then it spikes and there's this pivotal moment to where, even in boss number 4, before you crash down, you're literally listening to Don't Fear the Reaper while fighting the boss. I just think everything it's very intentional, and I love that regardless of the intent and how easy it is to pick up on, there's still just so much up to interpretation. It's very
everyone
I was
Every one of these
very
zones has
Souls-like.
yeah. Well, there it is.
My bad.
Every one of these zones has such a narrative to it, where the place where you come into the level is not the same place where you'll exit it. There's sort of like a ramping up of tension, and that's throughout all of them. In the first one, when you're coming down to Frike, is it the first boss? Freak. Super
I've always
Freak?
said Frike just because it has an IKE at the end.
Yeah. Anyway, that sort of ramp up to opening up the locked door and then fighting your way up that staircase. It has such a building of tension. Crimson Waste, obviously, like you said, working your way up the mountain, and it's a constant sort of like climb. The sort of temple and activating the sonar sound that's going to get you home, and then fighting your way to the final boss there. All of the levels are so smartly designed where you can rearrange these sort of different elements within it and still maintain that sense of narrative of climbing through and succeeding from level to level. I think is really, really impressive, and one of the game's like absolute strengths.
I agree. And I think that's why I think my all-in moment for this game was when I got to Area 3. Area 3 is not the most beautiful area in the game. It's the like the temple area, if I'm not mistaken. But it is, in my opinion, the best designed, because you have like this open outside world where these structures are like almost every time you play through, obviously it's procedurally generated, but like you said, the zones are generally the same. But like every time I would replay that area, and it probably was one of my least replayed areas because that's like right in the middle of the story. So
yeah,
you're trying real hard to not die there, or else you got to go all the way back. But just like these big sprawling temple landscapes with like multiple floors that are like connected via like a hook shot or like some other like way to where if you go, you can't get back. Or if you can, you got to make a giant loop. And just the way that everything's structured enables that, when a lot of the other ones have like branching paths, but there's not a lot of looping to them. So like I really appreciated how that level was strung together. And it also had some like, every time I played this game, it seemed like there was like a new type of like big enemy. A lot of the regular enemies are the same, but like I never encountered like the automaton like guy that would spawn in the first time I played through this game ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it wasn't until like I picked it up on PC and played through it that I even fought that guy.
Lucky motherfucker.
Yeah, for sure. Like I was kind of shocked by that. So like it sounds like some of the enemies are tied to the different drop zones that you're able to run through. Maybe I just got lucky and didn't run through those on one of my other runs. But yeah, that was probably my all-in moment, was just being able to look out and like see like Atropos in like a different setting, like as far as the game could render, with like structures in the backgrounds and like these huge statues of like these towering I forget what they were called. They were called the Forgotten, the
Forsaken.
Yeah, there we
Something
go.
Like that.
The statues of these quote unquote Forsaken, and it was like, it's just beautiful. Like it was so cool to be in that world. And like the sound design in this game was the best.
Phenomenal.
If you play this game and you don't have like, there's two games in the history of gaming that I would say it is worth picking up like 7.1 surround sound and playing with them. It is Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, and this game. Like two of the best. It was actually nominated for best sound in multiple game awards, or multiple different video game avenues when it came out. So definitely,
I don't doubt it.
Some of the best out there.
I do not doubt it. Every weapon has such a distinct sound to it. The all of the music, by the way, is fucking incredible. It is tense and ethereal and haunting.
Yes.
I nothing but good things to say about the atmosphere of every one of these levels, like just phenomenally well done throughout.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like when you're in the first area specifically, I think the first area's sound works to its advantage, and I think that all of them do, but I think the first one is probably the most effective. And I think that's important because it needs to get the people into the game. It needs to like envelop them immediately so they feel more connected to the experience. But like the first area is the most teeming with life. You get the feeling that even though there's not random creatures running around and things like that, that there would be if you had been there in a moment. It feels very, very alive, and it sounds alive too. Like you can hear like the tentacles like moving around from like things that are dropping from the ceiling, and you can hear what like maybe some weird alien bird like cawing in the distance, and like the whole thing just feels very like weird, but also way more alive than you feel while you're playing it. Now that might just be a personal problem.
No,
but,
there's a fully realized sense of place. Like the minute you touch down on Atropos, it feels like an actual like planet. Yeah, it's incredible shit. Was there a weapon that you vibed with the most? Did you have a favorite? Where one of those, like, there were a few times throughout this game where, you know, you'd pick up a chest and unlock something random, and you'd be like, those stats are technically better, but
oh yeah, for sure. I don't know, dude. There's so many times where like I'll come up on a chest and I'm like, you see, I like this weapon, or it'd be like I used a key to open this chest and it's a fucking pistol. I'm fucking mad. But no, I do. I have two that I would alternate between. Anytime I saw these two, I would change them. But if I had to choose between the two, it would be the Tachomatic Carbine.
Hell yeah.
Love that weapon. And the other one is the Hollow Seeker. I was a big fan of it.
Hell yeah.
Because it has like that, all the secondary fire modes, and as you level up your adrenaline, which we should talk about that too, because that's a great game mechanic. Both of those are just fantastic. I like the machine gun aspect in this game. When you're moving so frequently, it's a lot easier just to hold down the trigger and just like aim and jump. Like you can focus just on your movement as opposed to your aiming as well. So shout out to anyone out there that mains the pistol like a boss, because that's hats off to you. What about you?
Absolutely a fan of the carbine. That became a late game favorite for me, especially when it got into, you know, there were certain perks for the carbine that just made it so head and shoulders above anything else I would pick up. Things like leech rounds, where you could restore health just by shooting things. Like immediately, like, oh, thank God, that's self-preservation. That's an easy pickup.
Yeah.
Early game, I loved the Electropylon driver. If it has the web, where it's able to fire out 5 at once and create just sort of, you really start to appreciate passive damage in this game, because your hands are going to be so full just dodging all the shit that's thrown at you. Where if you're able to throw one thing out once and be like, okay, that's dead in a couple seconds, and then move on to something else.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
You really start to appreciate that shit.
Especially like for some enemies that are like damage soaks, like the tree people. I guess is the best way to call them.
Fuck the tree. Fuck the Ents. And I don't say this enough. You know what? They get too much love and they're weird.
Fuck you, Treebeard, and all your fucking weird friends. Maybe that's where the Ent wives went. They went to Atropos, and that's who we're killing. Okay. It's coming full circle now. Thank you, Tolkien.
All interpretations of this game are valid. I think I said that at the top.
Oh, man. Yeah, according to the internet, I did a quick Google here. The best weapon in the game by damage output is the Electropylon driver. The weapon I used the least was that one, and the like, I don't know what it was called, but it was effectively like a grenade launcher. Worthless. Fucking worthless, man. Like, it's high damage, but it has like a 3-round clip. And
the Pyroshell? Was that the
yeah,
Pyroshell caster?
that sounds, yeah, I have a list here. Pyroshell caster, which for some reason on this list is the third highest. So
No. Nope, wrong.
yeah, that's what I was. Nope,
That was my
not.
thing with this game, is that there's a few weapons that you unlock throughout the course of it, and every single one of them was dog shit to me. You unlock that one, you unlock the Dreadbound, which is terrible. You unlock the Coil Spine Shredder, which I like grudgingly used throughout a couple of rounds on the Tower of Sisyphus, but that was it. This was something that I think I sort of wish the... How do I phrase this? I wanted the game to have a little bit more variety in its weapons. Because I think having run it a whole bunch of times, a lot of my runs started to look somewhat similar, where like every section that I was in, I was looking for certain weapons.
Yeah.
You know, in the first, in either, you know, biome 1 or biome 4 in the forest, I was looking for an electropylon driver because things tend to generally stay still and are on the ground, and that works very well with the net.
Yeah.
In the mountain, either, you know, 2 or 5, I'm looking for either a carbine or a hollow seeker, something that shoots out a whole bunch of projectiles and is able to hit things like in the air.
Yeah.
And then in the end game, I'm looking for the carbine because survivability becomes important because enemy damage like spikes through the fucking roof.
Yeah, it sure does. It's fucking flying robot machines, dude. Like they look like, I don't even know. They're just like, they're really tanky, freaking like green metal, like tubes almost, and they're assholes. And whenever they die, they fly at you and explode, and it's so infuriating.
Oh, God. Yeah, no, I lost so many runs to those guys just because I didn't have damage up high enough, or like, you know, I had rushed through the first biome just trying to get back to the second, and like didn't have enough health and would immediately get one shot in the first room and realize like, okay, I am doing something wrong.
I think I agree with you about the weapons in this game. Like, it doesn't feel like there's good enough variety. But here's what I think about it. I think the game has a lot of variety in the weapons because they added things like each weapon has like 7 different modes it can utilize. But the game does absolutely nothing and is dog shit at teaching you how to do those things. And then having the ability, if they unlocked the ability to like, if you find, let's say I had a carbine and I found another carbine that had like less damage output, but I like the perk of that one, I could swap the perks or like take different aspects of that weapon at like some type of downgrade. Because the game has a very clear way, which we'll need to talk about this too, a very cool way of like being like, all right, we're going to give you this perk, but you're going to take this disadvantage as well. Like it has a really good way to do that. So like they could have done something other outside of like the Rotland globbers and like the weird weapon things they added in Sisyphus, ways to alter your current weapons like permanently with other things that you could find outside of the efficiency boosts.
That's fair enough. A little bit more of customization would have been interesting. And more often than not, I was pretty happy to take whatever, like, you know, I was given throughout the game. But it was sort of like I defaulted to that same sort of progression of like, okay, I got to get this gun in Act 1. I got to get this gun in Act 2. And then I should have enough stats to pick up whatever in Act 3 and survive it until I inevitably get a carbine.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you had mentioned to me before that you were really, really partial to the shotgun, the Spitmaul blaster. What changed there? Was it just like late runs?
Yeah. So early in Act 1 or Biome 1, you can absolutely run train with the Spitmaul blaster. You're totally fine to get through that. It'll fall off immediately afterward, and there's no sort of traits that really make up for that damage fall off. Because, you know, when it gets to things like that suicide dive kind of robot you were talking about, doesn't play well with a weapon that you have to get up close with. That's actually not great. So finding other ways around that, and actually like things like the electropylon driver, which I had mained up until that point, you know, where you're doing passive damage, but only a little bit of passive damage at a time, gives it a long time for it to activate that dive, which means that you could have 5 of them coming at you from an area that you had already moved your focus away from, because like you had shot a net. You can focus on something else now.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that the game changed up enough where, like, biome by biome, it felt like I had to change my strategy and the sort of weapon that I brought to it. And I felt like it forced me to get good with a lot of different weapons that normally in a regular sort of third-person shooter like this, I would ignore.
Yeah. I really appreciate that point, because I think it's very much the same thing. And it actually ties into the question I was getting ready to ask you pretty well is, do you think it was ever considered, or why did they not? Do you think they didn't give you the option of always having like a pistol or having the ability to like carry a backup weapon? Because like functionally, as long as you were using one, the game wouldn't have been too different, because you do find weapons pretty often. But like, why do you think they didn't have the option of carrying a second weapon or having that backup weapon option?
I think it would have. Yeah, that's sort of interesting. Something that we haven't talked about up until this point is the idea of weapon proficiency, which is sort of like, you know, in your run, you accrue this stat called weapon proficiency. And as that goes up, the weapons that you find become more powerful and have better stats and things. I think if you were able to carry a backup weapon, you would just end up swapping weapons twice as often and would probably be overpowered.
Or
there's
underpowered.
Been a couple. Yeah. Well, that's true too. You can hose yourself that way. But there's been a couple of times where, like, you know, I've had like a carbine with leech rounds and found a different carbine that has a attack stat that's like through the fucking roof, way better than the one I have. And that's a really interesting game choice of having to decide between, like, okay, do I keep the one with stats I really like, or do I keep the one that's going to kill things way faster? And if you give people the chance to pick up 2 weapons, you sort of give them an out to that sort of thorny question that could, like, has legitimate consequences. That can end a run if you choose poorly and then play badly in the next room, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I hadn't considered that. I'm glad you said that. I don't know. I just need to learn to trust developers, but they all also are all real finicky and they hurt me often. So I don't know if that trust is ever going to be restored anytime soon.
And it's not like all the choices here are incredible. I'm not going to defend everything. There's a lot of rooms, especially early on in the first few biomes in this game, with a lot of like pits in the middle of like combat zones.
Oh my god! You just like fall in. And it's like, oh.
They're super punishing, and I think are just unfair with the amount of other shit you have to handle. You know, a lot of enemies by design are super aggressive and force you to be on the back foot, sometimes running backwards entirely. Yeah. And like, if I'm running backwards and focusing on 4 different things, I don't think it's necessarily fair that I fell into a pit. It's not a one-hit kill or anything, but it does take a substantial amount of your damage, and it resets your adrenaline. And that's just such a, I don't know, it's such a blow to your self-worth.
Is that a stat? Like you need a level in this self-worth?
It's a hidden stat, but it's a stat. I'll say this, it's real.
Is it? I don't know. It's been so long, I don't remember. Oh man. Yeah, like weapon proficiency is cool because like you'll find like various different, man, there's so many items in this game that talking and thinking about all of them feels really overwhelming, but they're so seamless. Like seamlessly integrated and so easy to understand. It's like it's trying to explain the board games to people where it's like, I swear, once you play it, it just makes sense.
God, the Vietnam flashback that just happened.
Yeah, trying to teach anyone to play Munchkin, they're just like, I'm never going to get this. And then they play it once. They're like, I only want to play this.
That's a great example. I think one of the things that makes it sort of digestible, even if like, you know, you're not thinking constantly about like, you know, well, what is my alt fire cooldown right now? Or like, what is my melee damage at right now? Is like, every item that you come across is a simple choice. Pick it up or don't.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's what I think makes it really sort of intriguing from a minute-to-minute sort of basis. I had a vague sort of fuzzy knowledge of what my build was from run to run. But I do have a sneaking suspicion that this was intentional. If I was doing like, you know, long sort of plays of this game, you know, an hour or two at a time, runs would sort of bleed together and I'd sort of forget what stats I had from run to run, which made me feel like I was a little bit trapped in the same sort of loop that Celine was in.
I was just getting her to say, almost as if you were Celine.
Yeah, exactly. Where there'd be a couple of times where you'd like, you know, you'd find one of those hidden sections where you drop down a pit, hit the bottom and take damage. And I'd be like, what the fuck? What did oh, right. I picked up the parasite. Wait, was that nope, that was this run. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, you're exactly right. It is very much like that. Yeah. I want to talk about the weapons and the items really quickly. And then I do want to talk about the parasites because I love the balance system in this game. Can we talk about how like every game should have an overload function? So like
hell yes, dude. Hell yes, it should.
This mechanic, so you're dealing with like alien weaponry. So automatically they're just like, okay, there is no reloading. Like you don't ever have to reload your weapon until you run out, or I should say there's no ammo. There's no ammo capacity. It's all like energy that rebuilds itself after a few seconds once you run out of ammo. But it was Gears that used Gears of War, right? That introduced like this overload mechanic, where if you run out of ammo, and while it's reloading, if you hit it at the exact right time, it'll give you the instant reload and you go right back to firing. This game, it is absolutely crucial that you learn how to use this. And it's one of those things that like the first time you try to use it, it's like, I missed it. And when you nail it once, it's like muscle memory.
It's
moving
ingrained.
Forward.
Yeah.
So every game needs this. So pay attention. Any shooter out there or anything with a gun, I should say.
It just creates such a rhythm, you know, where you're not able to fire mindlessly. I mean, you're still pretty much holding down the trigger until like the clip is empty or whatever, but you're anticipating that and you're getting yourself in a position where you can safely hit that and get back to firing. You know, it feels almost like a mini game, which I sort of love in the middle of combat, where it keeps you focused on, you know, not just the damage that you're putting out, because in a lot of like other bullet hell games, you don't have to think about holding down the trigger. You know, you're just focused on dodging. And in this, you can't do that. You have to sort of fluctuate between focusing on where you're aiming and also fixating on dodging and incoming damage. It's a really like, it's a dance. Every single one of these rooms is a dance. It's really cool.
It is. Yeah, I agree. It is really cool. I like the overload feature a lot because it like, once you get the rhythm down, obviously like the overload will change depending on the weapon, how big it is, how small it is, what type of stats it has will have like a bigger or smaller overload like meter. But once you nail it for that, like it's like an extension of like, it's like a new item. Like it's like a whole new perk for the weapon, because like you'll get into this rhythm of like, all right, I know I can hold down the trigger for this long with, you know, the Hollow Seeker, or this long for this weapon. And then I can instantly like just pivot. I'll use that like split second to like run around the corner. And by the time I get back around, I've already triggered the overload. And it's like, if you miss that, it's like absolutely crucial, or it's devastating, because it's like you come around the corner and then like there's something there that's not getting shot, and then it like messes up your damage flow. But then the reason I think it's so awesome is like you're able to implement something as simple as like an extra 1 second in reload, literally changes the whole scheme of the room that you're running. Like, in having it make that big of a difference just on such a small thing that a lot of people don't even use. I know people that have played this game and didn't even know there was an overload function. So it's pretty cool that like it could be so crucial. But I know a lot of people aren't freaking horrendously awful nerd like I am either, so that's fine. I had to ask this because I feel like I need to bring up a complaint because I've been praising this game. I feel, and probably easily remapped, and I just the core scheme, I did not enjoy where the use item function was in this. I found myself using items a lot whenever I shouldn't have.
Interesting. So I also had in my notes a complaint about item mapping.
What weird.
Use item I ran into a few times, like especially early on, when I was still like, one of the things that I think affected my gameplay was this was the first like hardcore third person shooter that I played with the Xbox Elite controller, which has like a couple of like extra paddles in the back of the controller that allow you to map, and I really got into trying to make use of those. And that threw me off at the beginning for a while. I mapped jump and dash to those, which means that I could dash without keeping my hands on the thumbsticks at all times. Which
that's cool. That's a good idea.
It was useful in the long run. It took a long time to get used to, and for whatever reason, just that extra brain power absolutely fucked me on like where are my consumables and shit like that. So I hit that a lot at the beginning.
Gotcha.
Later on in the game, when I had gotten used to that, one of the things that really dicked me over, and especially in the Tower of Sisyphus, where I think levels are a little bit smaller and more condensed, was having pickup item and the grappling hook latched to the same button.
That was not an issue for me.
For me, that was a run killer in a couple of times, where like I was trying to pick up health and would immediately, without realizing it, like,
Yeet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeet myself to another bridge where 8 guys are like, hey, fucker. And that was just kind of it. And like the first couple of times, that's the game's fault. The 8th time it happens, it's probably my fault. But,
is there no option to remap that? Like,
probably I didn't, because
fair.
At that point, it's muscle memory, and I'm not going to try to relearn that shit.
Yeah, I had done something similar to you. I had picked up one of those like PlayStation Edge controllers, which is like effectively the PlayStation version of the Elite, and it has the 2 little back paddles on it. And I mapped both of them to be dash, because you had mentioned you mapped yours to passively mentioned that to me, that you had mapped yours, and I was like, that's a good idea. So I mapped it to that, but it was nice because like with both of them being dash, I could just hold the controller and then just like a full hand squeeze. And then the PlayStation has the haptic sensors in like that game to where, and even if you're playing on PC, it carries over that functionality. So like you can set like the trigger density, so it's like it has 3 different settings on it to where you could be like how far down you want to hold the triggers in. So you could set like the left one to be like a lot more intense and the right one to be like easy squeeze. So I'd set my one to fire my gun like really easy to click, but the others for like latching onto things and things like that, like a tough squeeze. So it actually gave like a lot of pushback when I was like doing that. And then it would like, when I pushed down, it would start to rumble as I would go up the like the wire or whatever it was. Really cool. Like, a lot of really cool features that PlayStation enabled with this type of game. And obviously they're going to reward their PlayStation consumers first, because that's where the game originally came out on. But
yeah. No, glad to see they gave you an easy mode. That's really cool.
Hey, you're the one that platinumed the game, not me. So
Yeah, and by the way, I wouldn't do that. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't done that, don't. You're going to end up running the same rooms a lot of times waiting for some stupid fucking ruins to spawn in.
oh, the sun fragments. God. Yeah. Trust me.
Okay. That, but for all of the audio recordings, all of the little like fragments and shit that you see throughout. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. No thanks. I'm glad that you liked it though. Like that was my biggest concern was that you were going to dislike the game. And I'll tell you why I thought that. So I mentioned before the PlayStation 5. I'd bought it on PlayStation 5 and then we had a cabin trip that I brought my PlayStation. I told everyone I brought it so everyone could play whatever they wanted to, but I brought it for Max to try Demon Souls and Returnal. And we ended up spending the whole time playing Drunk Souls. Effectively watching Alan play Demon Souls and just sucking ass the whole time at the cabin. But I thought the reason you did because you had no interest in picking it up and trying it. Now, obviously, accessibility with it being on the PC now, and there not being much on the PS5 in the way of persuading you to buy one until whatever Hideo Kojima comes out with next.
There's going to be, at some point, there's going to be a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. If that ends up being a PS5 exclusive, I will 100% buy a $400 video game.
Is Silent Hill 2 not enough to do it for you?
Absolutely the fuck not, Michael. No.
Really? I don't know.
There is
like
one game on the planet that will be a system seller for me.
I hate that for you, Max. I hate that for you.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I remember whenever the PS4 came out, I didn't buy it until Bloodborne. And I bought the Bloodborne PS4.
Fair enough.
Well,
guess what I bought it for? It was Metal Gear
Solid 4. Yeah. Weird. Oh man. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like has to do with weapons, but like while we're on items, did you have a favorite item? Because like eventually, like you start off with the ability to carry one. I think you can carry at was it end game? Was it 3 or 4 consumables? I think it's 3, right?
3. It's 3. You're talking consumables or like artifacts and shit like that.
I don't even want to get into artifacts. I think we should mention it, but like, because there's just so many of them, and it feels they're also random in the percentages and whatnot that they provide.
Most of them are, just kind of nice to have bonuses, and I like that. In terms of consumables, I'm terrible with names. There's the Disruptor, I think it's called, which is just like a big like AoE blast, which is basically
down all the turrets.
It's a room. No. Well, there's that one, which is also great, especially when doing Tower of Sisyphus runs, because half of those levels are just fucking turrets.
True.
Dismantler. It's called the Dismantler, where it's just like a giant AoE blast, and it's effectively a room clear. Where like, you know, if you're stuck in a room with a couple of the like Forsaken or whatever, you know, where they just put you in a room with a couple of 2 boss enemies or whatever, you can drop that and lose half their health in one blast. Like,
yeah,
that's a run saver. Those are pretty easy.
I was gonna say outside of the like Sylphium vials, like that's kind of a given. I would always try to have one of those on.
Yeah,
but that's the cop out answer.
Those are incredibly helpful. Or like, you know, the one that fixes a malfunction for free.
Yes, very helpful. I like the obelite siphon myself. Like, where, like you can turn like, all right, it's like, all right, I know I'm gonna be in this cool room where there's a lot of enemies, so I'm gonna activate this, go absolutely bonkers, and then refill my health with all the obelites like laying around. That was a favorite of mine. But you're right, like the Disruptor, the Dismantler were also like, every item has like a really niche use, like the Apex to like push you up back to like top proficiency.
I would say I would generally try to have those for boss fights.
Yes.
where we're probably going to take a hit. And if you take a hit, then you're probably not going to work your way back up to max,
Yeah. For sure. Let's talk about proficiencies for a second, or not proficiencies.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. The adrenaline, because I love that feature. I also think this is something that other games should have, but it's effectively what the adrenaline is how long you can survive while doing, or how long you go while dealing damage without taking damage. So the more enemies that you kill in a string, you get bonuses. If you kill, there are things that will like effectively modify the numbers or add the amount of enemies you have to kill for malfunctions. But essentially, at a set number of enemies that you kill, you'll go from adrenaline level 1 all the way up to 5, 5 being the maximum. And then as it adds these like adrenaline markers, every one of them has like a perk. And it's cool because they're not just like damage. Like I think perk 2 is like level visibility, so like fog will clear and you can see more of your surroundings and things like that.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure what 1 and 3 and 4 do, but I know 5 puts you on like ultra like blast mode, to where it's like your weapon gets like an extra projectile and like you're a little bit faster and like all this crazy shit. So like you want to be at like that level like at all times. I love that in this game, because not only does it give you an incentive to not get hit outside of your health, but whenever you get to that like high mark, it's like that, it's almost like that pulse at the bottom of the screen that's like golden and like really fast. It keeps you like me anyway, when I would see that, I'd be like, okay, like I'm on high alert at all times. Then I get hit and I'm like, I don't give a shit about this run anymore for the next like 10 seconds. It really added like a weird, like emotional, like roller coaster for me.
It's your emotional momentum is what it is, it's really.
Go ahead.
I just love the fact that it's a combo meter effectively, but it's a combo meter that rewards you in like some very concrete ways. Even getting a couple of kills, the first level gets you an extended meter for the instant reload, which is like huge. That's huge.
Yeah, because the box is really small initially for the.
It's fucking hard.
Yeah.
So if you can pull it off a few times and you're rewarded for balancing that without getting hit, then, it makes it easier and you can focus on other shit. I think it's a absolutely brilliant system. And one of the things that I really like about it is that it's not strictly necessary to a run. Like, I don't know, it's just something kind of in the back of your mind as you're focusing on other things.
I agree. And it like it'll pop up and there'll be like this cool little weird like ripcord sound like as you like get proficiencies and whatnot. So it's like there like I said before, there's absolutely a million things going on the screen at one time in this game, but they're like segmented and they're so digestible that it doesn't feel like there is at all. Very easily understandable, because like on top of all those things, we talked about the weapon proficiencies that like you're always wanting to make sure that you're finding ways to scale your proficiencies so your weapons get more powerful. On top of that, you have repair efficiencies. So if you lose health, you can find these Silphium. God, there's so much in this game, like talking about all this. You find
it's just an elegant system. All of it just fits together so well.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
No, you're fine. You find these Silphium, so they're small or large, or small, medium, or large Silphiums, and they effectively refill your health. And if you wander into an area and you have full health or higher health, the scaling of probability of what they do changes a bit to, instead of giving you health, it'll fill up your maximum health. You have to get 2 or 3 natively, but if you have a certain perk, 2 of those will add a little bit of a maximum boost to your health bar, which effectively is what you want to be focusing on the entirety of every run, is finding ways to maximize your health bar like at all costs.
Pretty much.
I will find myself turning down insanely good perks if it like lowers my protection some or something like that. Like I absolutely don't want any of that happening to me. But it's cool in the way that like even the way that you ingest health is tampered with. It'll, you'll lose proficiencies to where it's like a large Sylphium typically at any point in time, if your Sylphium integrity or your repair integrity is normal, will probably just refill you, if not get you almost. But there are items that can degrade that, or there's some that will just continually improve that to where even a small one will get you like a ton of health. So there's just so much customization in this game that like goes without explanation that you just kind of pick up on just by moving through the world. And I love that there's so many elements of this game that are self-explanatory because of how Celine, like I mentioned earlier, would understand those things because she's been in this loop hundreds of times.
Yeah. It's a strength and a weakness at times. Because I think you're right. A lot of these core mechanics and a lot of these pickups and things, they're not fully explained, but easy to grasp in the first couple of seconds of of interacting with them. There are other things like a lot of the devices in rooms that you find that you may not understand what they do, even the first couple of times you use it. And I'm talking about things like the reclaimer, or like the bed that you sleep on, which sometimes will refill health and sometimes fucking doesn't, and there's no explanation for that shit. Or what's it called? It's effectively a save state where if you die, you'll return to that point, but the game doesn't explain that to you in any sort of concrete way.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Like, just having to kind of experiment and like, and I think I like that a lot because I think there's two of those like bed things. There's one that like gives you health and stuff, and then there's one that's like it'll give you something, but it's gonna hurt you. And by the way, you don't have any control or know what that thing is, and maybe it'll give you something. So
which is why I never fucked with it the entire time playing with it. Yeah. I did that once. It took half my health, and it gave me a consumable, and I went, fine, all right.
No,
fuck
thank
you then.
But yeah, I liked that, like going up to that thing, because like ether in this game feels so damn valuable. There's yet a fucking another mechanic that I haven't even touched on. It's ether, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally throughout the world, you find these like little glowing purple balls that have like these white sparks coming off of them, and it's ether, and you effectively use these to like either not buy consumables, because that's what you use oblets for, which we still haven't talked about that either. But like I love the use of ether because like it has like a tangible feel because it helps explain consistency in her world. It's the only thing in this world that carries and functions in the same way that her loop does. And I find that really fascinating in a way that's like, what is this? Like, and I'm trying to think of like how I've thought tons of times, like how does this stuff tie into like the overarching narrative that the game has? Like, what would this thing be that like she's picking up? What does it represent as it like she carries it through with her and it heals malignancy, like these little balls of light and memories or whatever they could be. I really thought that was cool that there's like these, you effectively carry them with you run to run, even if you die and you never use them, they're permanent. But you use them to like purge malignancy from things. You use them to buy upgrades, things like that. So I like that a lot. I was really big fan of the ether in the game because I always felt like a little nugget of happiness every time you found one. And then you go on runs where there's none, and then you'll go on runs where there's 50. So
yeah, and you can use them to, you're sort of encouraged to save as many of them as you can on a run, especially early on, because that's what you use to unlock new artifacts and things and add them into the pool for later runs. So it became a real choice to use one to, get a boost of health or to save at a certain point. Where dropping 6 of them felt like, okay,
yes,
gotta make this one count now.
Yeah, dude, it did. Like I like there was when I was playing just like a few days ago on PC, I had done like tons of runs and I hadn't spent any of them. I had like 36 of them like banked up. And I still was like unwilling to like drop 4 or 5 or whatever it is for like the save state in the area. I was just like, I just don't think it's worth it. Like I do want to mention this because I think it's funny. The game has this like really so like there's the obelisks that like essentially it's basic money that drops from the enemies. You use it to like buy stuff, your consumables and extra lives and whatnot. And you can also use them to like expand your health or your health bar, things like that. And buy certain perks like protection or defenses or damage outputs. And it's very expensive. Everything in this game is very expensive. Like you don't walk into a room and kill anything and walk into the next one and buy something. It's like you essentially have to clear a whole fucking like zone before you're able to buy literally anything.
Yeah. And you're going to have to turn down 4 other things you want in order to buy the one thing that you really need.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that noticed that. It is like either everything here is dog shit and I just have a million ovulates, or I need everything on this lineup. Like the game is terrible at that. But there's this machine where it's like if you have like 10 ether, you can trade it in for like 1,000 obelisks or something like that. It's like this balance system. How horrendously unbalanced is that thing? Like no one is going to trade. I think it's like 10 for like 100 obelisks or something like that. It's
10 for like 200 or 100 or 200. I can't remember which. I'll say as I got further into my runs, that became much more viable. I found I wasn't using ether as much because I had unlocked like everything you could get from, run to run. Which meant that I generally had like some ether just sitting in my like tank and I didn't have shit to spend it on. So using that to spend on obelisks for an artifact that I really needed, something like high cost, like the resin synthesizer, which takes it from, needing 3 to needing 2 to upgrade your health. That was an easy trade to make.
True. That's fair.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite things about this game is that I felt like, the strategies and the way I approached this game from run to run really evolved, or got more honed. It felt like every run was a learning experience. And because it was so clear what my cause of death was, it felt like every time I went back to the start, I was armed a little bit better for the next time. And that's not always the case. And I think if this game had been a little bit more punishing, or enemies have been more aggressive or more difficult, or like, I don't know, it so could have easily been an unfair game. And for me, Returnal never felt unfair, which I think is so difficult of a balancing act.
Yeah. I I think there were definitely parts, like I said, that I think it felt unfair, but like the game is totally okay with you thinking that, because later on you come
Maybe
back.
Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Well, you'll come back to these areas that feel like you'll feel like just suck, and then like you come back and you had a better run or different weapons, and you're just like, I like manhandled that. Like, was it always this easy? Like sometimes it feels like there's an actual paradigm shift in like the difficulty for those zones, but it really is just perfectly balanced, and it is really crucial for you to play the game that you're most comfortable playing. And I like that about the game is there's not one way. If you want to play with the electro pylon driver, whatever it's called, awesome. That's cool. Even in those later areas where shit's flying around, good for you. Like if you could pull that off, that's amazing. Because like in those later areas, especially because I don't feel like the later areas, I think they're very well designed, but I don't think they're as fun to play as the first areas are.
I would agree. Yeah.
And I feel like that becomes crucial because as you're locked into being Celine, and like, I don't know if you felt this way, but in those last areas, I had like as I was moving from like room to room, because like you can't see the whole map, it kind of unlocks as you're moving through. As you're moving from room to room, I was like, all right, like I'm out of health. Like, my health bar's halved. I don't have any items. Like, I'm scrounging, I'm scavenging as I'm going through, and I'm getting anxious room to room because I'm like, this is getting harder, and I'm not, I'm not getting new weapons. I'm not getting anything. So like that sense of like anxiety as I'm moving through was not a negative for me. It was a very positive because I was like less focused on those environments. And as cool as, don't get me wrong, the underwater environment's sick. Like it looks really cool, but it just doesn't have the same sense of environment as those others do, at least for me in the beginning.
Yeah. I didn't like, click with any of the enemies in the underwater section as well, where none of them felt particularly fun to fight, and especially that big beefy octopus motherfucker whose tentacles in the bottom and then just two fists up top.
Yeah.
Fuck that dude. I hope he's listening to this. Fuck you.
Honestly, like the underwater area was so cool because the environment is very dark. It's like, it looks like you're, walking on the ocean floor kind of, but it's everything. Like half the enemies that you fight in that aren't not even in viewable distance. They're like shooting at you from 1,000,000 miles away, and you're just like shooting into the darkness at something that's like coming at you, and you're like, all right, like, so I was trying to dig at like what the intent was there, because it's like, why? Because it's such a drastic change from the rest of the game. Everything else is like really in your fucking face, and like lasers are going off, and there's like enemies with swords chasing you that like come up out of the ground and warp everywhere, and then you get into the ocean and you're just like, neat. Like there's
vibing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the game,
that's a great point.
Creativity spiraled at the end, but not in like a bad way. Like, because like I said, I was focused on like getting to that end, and I feel like as Celine, like she probably felt very similar in those moments, because she's chasing White Shadow. She gets White Shadow, and then she's like, okay, well now I got to go down here, and it's like, where is this thing? Like I'm getting so frustrated, and that's how I felt. I was like, am I going to survive, or I'm going to have to do this all over again? Yeah. And I feel like that's exactly how Celine would feel. Like, is this something I'm going to have to redo?
This is a pretty good, I'm glad you're touching on this. Because I think at a certain point, the progression of the game makes more sense narratively than it does gameplay wise. It makes sense from a narrative perspective that this game would end in an underwater sequence. This is the sort of seat of Celine's trauma, the car crash where she goes over the bridge, whether or not she's the mom or the child in the back or both. Who fucking knows? That doesn't matter. But this is sort of the seat of whatever sort of intense guilt she feels it is in that moment. So returning to, that underwater moment makes sense. Where it doesn't make sense is from a gameplay perspective, and I say this as an incredibly bitter person, one of the mid-game pickups that you get enables you to move through hazardous materials like lava or like, I don't know, big red sections. And I went fucking rad and then jumped into a pool and died.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I know.
Because
I did the exact same thing even on my second run. Like my second time playing through on PC, I was like, oh yeah, I got that thing now. Yeet. Fuck.
The last thing you're able to jump in is a regular pool. And from a story perspective, that makes total sense. From a gameplay perspective, that is jarring, and you're going to take a hit there just because.
Yeah, I will say, though, luckily the item you need to go in the water is not far from there. Like,
no, it's not.
It's very close gameplay-wise. Yeah,
It's the next one you pick up, but there's going to be a moment of disconnect for you.
yeah. I don't know, man. Like I love that progression. I like the like I loved when you'd find new items like the sword and like the environmental hazards, the underwater things, that they were like these things that she would just like latch on and it would physically hurt her for a
Yeah.
moment. That I thought that was neat. Like the idea of the pain, it matched the whole things with the parasites, which we've touched on like in passing, but essentially like this game has like this perk system to where it's like pluses and minuses. You find these parasites or these weird like I don't know, like everything else in this game, it's some type of weird octopus like creature, but this time it's like a mosquito, cockroach. I don't know. It's gross and weird. But essentially it like latches onto her with like 8 little limbs, and then it grants you like a perk, but also will have a disadvantage. And I like those because like that, I think those are like some of the core like mechanics that the game was built off of. Like having a plus and minus system, it's something not a lot of games have. Most games nowadays are focused on making you bigger, better always. Like, and there's no regression. And Returnal is just completely okay with being like, we're only going to give you regression this run. Like, you will never be as good as you were whenever you started in this run. So fuck you.
Yeah.
And I like that.
You'll be better at one thing. You're going to be dog shit at this other thing. Like you decide, what do you want to give up? And I really like those kind of parasites because they can really cater your play style. You know, it forces you to get a little bit experimental. The farthest I think it goes is disabling your ability to pick up healing items, but you get a little bit of health back on hits against enemies. That changes up the entire way you play the game. It's awful, but you can do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, or like the especially in the first zone, this is really crucial. Like there'd be one that would like you increase your damage output by 20%, but every single enemy drops a pool of acid. Yeah. And it's like I would find myself like I'd be like, yeah, I'm taking that, and then like 6 times I would run over a pool of acid. I'm like, fuck me.
I'm such a fucking moron. Yeah, no, I did that all the time to the point where anything that had like but enemies drop a pool of acid, it was like, well, that's probably good for other people, but I'm an idiot. So,
yep, same.
So that's not happening. Oh, that's so funny that you call that one out.
I have to say this too about the parasites. I found it to be very also narratively focused. This idea that there are give and takes as like a mother or a father, like I can resonate with this. It's like, I want to do this thing, but I will have to sacrifice like time with my child. And that's a reoccurring theme in this, especially as you see in like the memories of the child when like in the kitchen, the drawing, things like that, being like completely absent and having to sacrifice the things that are very important to you and that to be able to do these, but they will have an absolute detrimental cost, is just a reoccurring theme of parenthood. Like I will have to eat very poorly tonight so I could like, I have made the occasional sandwich with 3-day-old lunch meat because like payday was right around the corner. Like those types of things are very real as a parent. And like especially like having like an absentee parent in this situation, I could see how that theme of like a parasite or viewing those things as parasitic in nature, even all the way down to, viewing a kid as parasitic in nature, is like a theme from this game that's very relevant. And I don't think that's unintentional.
No, I think that's fair. I want to watch an hour-and-a-half Disney movie with my kids. But all my enemies will drop a pool of acid upon death. Like, that's a hard choice as a parent.
All right. I see. You don't agree with that point. That's fine.
No, I do. But I'm still focused on how much the pool of acid fucked me up.
It's to the point you're like very aware of where you're walking IRL. Like you're like, oh
Yes.
god.
Look, it is kind of karmic in a way. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Of like, there is a benefit to this, but there's a flip side to it.
Yeah.
And that feeds into the malignancy as a concept in this game as well, where certain pickups or things that you need, not even things that you need, things that would just be nice to have, an extra bit of health or something like that, has a chance of giving you a random debuff. And that gives you effectively like a side quest to try to, undo it. I shied away from these very, very much at the beginning of this game, and then started to really sort of rely on them.
Yes. Same.
Like, I love this system where it feels like you're giving yourself these sort of self-imposed challenges. I don't know. I haven't seen a game do something like this, and I thought it was really cool.
My only complaint with the system in general was that it only let you have 3. Like,
yes.
I wanted more challenge out of some of these areas, especially it's like, this is the 10th time in the last 2 hours I've run area 1. Like, for fuck's sake. Like, I will pick up every single malignant item. I will smack every obsolete stack, like, that's malignant, everything. But then I would stop doing it because I would just take damage the next time. As a, like, I felt like the system was balanced enough that having more than 3 malfunctions would have been completely fine. Like, don't get me wrong, it would have been a difficult thing to overcome.
Sure.
But I don't think any of those malignancies or malfunctions were designed in a way that couldn't stack. And because I was trying to think if there's any that, like, if you had 2 of these, like, it would literally be impossible to get there. But I can't think of any that'd be that way. So I don't know. It felt pretty limiting to only let me have those. But it was very rewarding to be like, okay, outside of like the ones that were like kill 20 enemies, I was like, yeah, I'd get there. But it's like,
yeah, exactly. I'm
kill
gonna get
5
this
enemies simultaneously or something, or kill 5 sets of enemies simultaneously. That shit was fun. Like finding ways to, kill 2 or 3 enemies at a single time and just really be creative with the tool set that you had. Sometimes that would like force you to change weapons. And, it was...
Or you'd look for a different alt weapon or things like that. And then you'd have to think like, okay, do I want to change up my entire weapon just to get rid of this malignancy? Can I live with it? Shit like that.
Yeah.
This game offers so many like minute to minute really interesting choices. Like thorny sort of problems that there's no one correct answer for. You just sort of have to feel out like, what am I personally good at?
I am glad you said that, because that was the next point I wanted to make, was that this game resonates differently with literally everyone that plays it. I know some people that bounce off this game fucking harder than a trampoline. Like, and I know some people that like, this is one of like, this was my 2021 game of the year. Like it is so good. And many other outlets thought it was as well. And some other outlets thought it was dog shit. Like everyone has such a different experience with this game, because in a way that like I was talking about, some games are all about like making you bigger, better all the time. And other games are literally like all about choices, like Pentiment. Like it is, there's just polar opposite game types. This game finds like a wedge in the middle, to where while it's not very story driven, it's got a strong narrative, it's got tons of choices, and everyone is impacted by those choices in a just a completely different way, and also makes those choices in a completely different way, just based off of their general ideas of how the game should be played, or their ideas of what perks are more important than other perks. And I love that so much about this game, because in the same way that they don't care, the point of this game, as they relay this, it's not to make you play the game very similarly. It's to let you experience it in a different way. And that allows every single person who plays this game to have this spider web of experience. And it just, everyone has that. So there's just a billion different stories out there in a way that Celine has experienced Atropos in a billion different ways and is just lost in it. And I love that, like similar, like you said, the like everything just like runs together as you're talking to different people about their experiences of this game. You, in every way, whenever we would talk about this, I could relate to exactly what you're saying, but I know that I had a completely different experience with it for the rest of the time. And I don't think there's a lot of games out there that can give that same, that sense, like communal difference, I guess is a way to say that. Like it's weird.
Yeah. What's really fun about it is that like all the choices that you make feel impactful. Not like you're just picking between two different stats, but really like every choice is sort of like a make or break. When we think about decision making generally in games, at least for the games that I play, generally those choices are like narrative, or they ask you a question about ethics. And a lot of the decision making in Returnal is strategic, and it forces you to be sort of analytic. And that's a fun way of thinking, and it challenges you in a way that that I haven't really been challenged in a long time, where like, you have to really think about like, what am I personally good at? What will benefit me the most based on the things that I have right now? And that was always really engaging and kept you on this very like this sort of tightrope. I personally think any sort of whatever kind of combination of perks and weapons you end up with in Returnal is probably viable, but not for everybody.
Yeah,
there's different skills. Look, if you put the fucking Dreadbound in my hand, no matter what perks that thing has, I'm not going to know what the fuck to do with it. I still don't get how that thing works. I think it's like a bow and arrow, I guess. I haven't figured it out yet.
No, there's like 4 weapons in the game that like I touched once and I was like, nope, I'm not comfortable with this, going back. Like, and I'm sure that there's other people that like felt the exact same way. There were weapons that like I literally looked at and I was like, that thing looks fucking weird, I'm not touching it.
No, I'm good actually.
Yeah, I agree. I like that, like the freedom of choice that like opens up for, like you said, from an analytical perspective. It forces you to use like to make choices just way differently than other games do, and also consistently and multiple times, like every minute, like just down to like, when do I dash? Did I have a parasite that like makes it harder to dash? I don't know how many times I picked up something. I was like, yeah, I can shave like 2 seconds off my dash reload time. Yeah, no, I can't, by the way. That's a perk I avoid, like, or I should say a malfunction I avoid almost entirely.
That's a mistake you only make once. Like, that's fine. How often am I dashing? Oh, I'm dashing a lot.
I want to ask you about the bosses of this game, because I think like I can't think of another. Now, again, I don't have a lot of experience here, so audience, don't crucify me for saying this. I definitely don't have a lot of experience in the bullet hell genre, but what little I do, I think this is some of the most fun boss designs capable of being placed in a bullet hell environment, like especially in a 3D space. Like I had so much fun with these bosses, and they're all different. They're all like environmentally fucking insane. And especially like the third boss, like I felt like I just accidentally swallowed like a bag of mushrooms, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? But like, I loved every boss in this, and they are all difficult in their own right. And it's cool because everyone struggles on like a different boss more than others. Like Hands down, by far, I died on Frake, the first boss, more than any other boss in the game, like by a large margin. I don't even think I ever died by fighting the second boss or the fourth boss, or no, the fifth boss, the final boss of the game, the underwater boss. I have never died on that boss.
No, I don't think anybody has.
But the second boss either. But like, dude, Frike beat my ass probably like 20 times in a row before I actually was able to clear that first area. And I think that like that difficulty spike is definitely intentional, because it's just like the game is only going to get harder as it goes on.
It's setting you up. Yeah.
But it switches things up. But what did you think about the bosses of the game?
I loved each of them. I thought they were well suited to their environment. Like you said, you know, for bullet hell shooters in 3D, these are brilliantly designed. I completely agree that for me, Nemesis, the third boss, was such a standout.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Like such a spectacle. One of the things that I think, having played this game into the dirt, that I sort of wished we got a little bit more of was some boss variety between runs. Because these bosses serve the narrative. And I think this game ultimately is about narrative, which limits how good of a roguelike it can be at times. To the point where, you know, in later runs, you can skip bosses entirely and you don't have to fuck with any of them until like the last boss, who is a pushover.
Yeah.
It would have been fun to see, you know, even if Frag is the first boss you fight the entire time, maybe having him have different sort of attributes or attack patterns.
Yeah.
To add a little bit of variety to it. Like basically, I guess my only complaint is that like I wish there were more of them.
Yeah, I agree. I would have liked, you know, because I know I try not to talk about Dark Souls, but like one of the things
I don't think anybody would ever accuse you of not trying to talk about Dark Souls.
fair. One of the things that like
really either of us
with Frike, one of the things I had to stop was to be like, okay, stop trying to just dodge everything and start paying attention to what he's doing. And like when I instantly, it was like the next time I beat him, like I was able like just analyze the attack patterns, dodge when he charges at you, and you're fine. But like I think in terms of like what sticks out the most to my head, like obviously the second or the third boss, like the whole time. Because it's like a platformer, it's a shooter, it's a bullet hell. It's like, there's just so many different like categories that game falls in. But like, I will say, I think the most fun boss was the second one. I love the idea of this guy that is just there he's using his music to torment you. And the entire time you are just a nuisance to him, like playing this organ. And is that the second? No, that's a fourth boss.
Yeah, that's fourth.
Yeah. So the whatever boss had the fourth boss, but yeah, like the whole time he's like more interested in playing this like organ that's creating this like amazing music during the boss arena. And it's like a struggle for me, because it's like the longer I let this boss battle go on, like the music is absolutely dope. Like I want to keep listening to it. But
all
like
this dude wants to do is play Don't Fear the Reaper. And on a spiritual level, I understand that.
Look, man, it has to be
get
done, all right?
Yeah. By the way, we've made it 2 hours into this podcast. Not one of us has made a joke about more cowbell. And I think we should be commended for that, frankly.
I'll let the audience tell us that. See. Honestly,
no,
though,
I'm directing them to tell us that.
Commend us in the Discord right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Like this is just one of those games to where like I'm curious to see what the reception is like to this. Because I know, like I said, I have a few friends that have played this game, and each of them have had a different experience with it entirely. And like the people out there that have found this episode and they're listening, like I want to know, like I must know what you think about this game. Because it's just it just hits everyone so uniquely. I did not in any capacity expect you to platinum this game. Like I thought this would be like you get to the end and you're like, dude, that was cool. Like I had a good time with it. But like, what was it? Like what drove you to that like need to, was it just the desire to play it more? Or did you just like want to get I'm just curious because you're not typically like a completionist.
No, not generally. And if I platinum a game, generally it has to be, for me, it has to be something that I super, super enjoy, and those achievements have to feel meaningful in some way. And there's a lot of games fall short of that, where it feels like that game is just, padding out the time that I spend with it.
Yeah.
This game, I wanted to spend more time with it, and it started with me wanting to get as much narrative as humanly possible from it. So I knew like I was going to beat the game, and also I wanted to get like, the secret ending or whatever just to see it. That'll get you 80% of the way there. And then I wanted to get, the audio logs and see what was in there. And, it started from me really wanting to sink into this world as much as possible. And also it's just fun to play, It's something that I could boot up for an hour and just take a run at it and see what I get. And then by the end, where I was just hunting for, the last thing I had to do was there were certain rooms that had to spawn in the underwater level. So I was just sprinting through, biome 4, not picking up anything, diving into a pool, and just basically starting at the end game with the beginning pistol.
Oh my gosh.
Which you can do. It is possible. It sucks, but you can do it.
Yeah. Man, I'm just like, this was a game that like, whenever I played it with Justin's PlayStation, that was like, I did not have enough time with it. And I gave him his PlayStation back because he picked it up on the way back through. So I only had like 2 days with it. And I probably only played it for about 6-7 hours during that time.
Sure.
But like, I was like, okay, I got to pick up a PS5. Like, again, like this is it. And I was hankering to play Demon's Souls again. Because the remaster still is probably one of the best looking games on any console yet. So, but anyway, that aside, like I thought about this game. I still think about this game all the time. Like, because like that subtext of the narrative and how fun it is to play, how frustrating it can be, how satisfying it is to conquer some of these rooms. And it's like, you just like, I don't know if you did this, but I would institute like personal challenges on like the star rooms that were like, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go in here and I'm not going to get damaged. And I'm going to like that was like goals for me that stuck with me. And like, I'll be playing this other, like I'm playing Tunic right now. And like, I've twice now been like, turned it off and I went to play Returnal. Like I was just like, I just want to go back to this game and keep playing it. And I love that it has that like innate replayability. And I hope it hits other people that way too. I'd like to think it does because it won some Game of the Year awards, but gaming journalism is dead and dog shit. So that's not really a reliable metric. So
Returnal has helped me realize one of the biggest metrics I have towards like shooters in general, I think. And that question is, has this game played enough of Doom 2016? Returnal has played enough Doom 2016. And if, by the way, if this gameplay is something that you've really vibed with, where every threat in front of you is clear and legible, and threatening and aggressive, and you're constantly on the back foot, constantly moving and cycling through just what's available to you, Doom's gonna be your shit. That's all I'm gonna say. So I don't know. I think going forward, that's going to be my metric. Is has this game played enough Doom 2016?
Oh, I guess I'm gonna have to play Doom 2016. So.
Yeah, yeah, Michael. It looks like you are.
I started it. I just was like, there's just a lot of red in this game, and I hate the color red. So
That is a. I've heard a lot of criticisms of that game, and that is a new one.
am I wrong?
There is red. Yeah.
It's a lot of red. I don't know. I love this game. I love it to tears. And this is one that just recently there's been, I know this has to feel very vindicating for you. Like we emotionally pushed someone to continue with Sekiro and they finally toppled Ishin. So Darth Egg, good for you. I'm so happy for you.
Shouts out to Darth Egg, who fucking took that guy down.
Yeah,
Man.
We've all been there and you've earned it. And now, goading Russ into playing Sekiro, and now he's miles ahead of where I was when I was playing it. Yeah, he's oh yeah, by the way, I took down the ogre and the whatever that dude's name is after with his little camp. Yeah, cool. And I was just fuck me, right? Oh, there's $30 gone.
I saw that as we hit the record button. I was like, holy fucking shit, Russ, goddamn.
Yeah, he's charging through it. But no, I say that because the discussions that we have in this, we've seen it a few times now to where it's people have listened to the episode and they're like, I'm gonna try that game. And of all the games that we've touched on so far, a lot of them have been ones that everyone's played or that they're critically acclaimed. And while this game was critically acclaimed, there's still so many people out there that haven't looked at it. Now that this is on PC, please play this game.
And by the way, don't sell yourself short, because we also cover, a lot of undiscovered indie games, not unlike Death's Door or Ocarina of Time. Shit that's kind of gone unnoticed.
I was wondering where the punchline was in there. So, but yeah, if you do play this game, jump in the Discord in the link in the description and tell us what you think. Because
yeah,
this is it. And if you played it because of this podcast, one, thank you. That's a huge compliment. And come in and tell us about it, because I want to know what you think about this game. If you're out there and listening to this and you're just I played this game and I'm not fucking joining yet another Discord. One, I get it. It's emotionally taxing.
Correct.
But two, I won't bother you. So, but yeah, man, I just really like this game. It's not a perfect game. There's definitely flaws with it. And we've talked about a few of those, but all in all, if a game, I have this much fun with it. I've bought it on multiple consoles just for accessibility. I continue to think about it. I continue to come back to it. This is the type of game that lives in my top library. If people were to be give me, it's not gonna be my top 5 games of all time because there's no super deep emotional connection to it, but it's definitely going to be on a list of I recommend this, and it will always be for the time being.
Yeah. How I would describe it is if I had to put together a list of 10 games to get to know me, or the kind of shit that
yes,
I vibe with. This is a great example of the kind of shit that is going to really stick with me, both in terms of gameplay, and I like this style of narrative that is deeply interpretive and ambiguous. This was hits across the board for me.
Yes.
And yeah, just to echo what you're saying, if you have prior experience with this game or you're listening to this podcast and want to check it out, would love to hear how do you interpret this story, or
Yes.
what are what are you bringing into it? Or like, is there a particular part of this game that really resonated with you? Yeah, would love to hear your sort of experiences with it, because you're right. We've gotten some traction with things like Sekiro, which I think was initially sort of intimidating to a lot of people, and once you get into it, yeah. Once you get into it, you know, you can find that maybe this is something that you fuck with. So yeah, please talk to us.
Yeah, if you're wondering what that awkward pause was when he said intimidated, I raised my hand. So that's what that was all about. But
and
like,
then I immediately raised my hand as if Michael was going for a high five through the computer. Because I just have one piece of lettuce rattling around my head instead of a brain.
You've talked a lot about like things with the games that what the games set out to accomplish, and like a marker of success for these games being like, did it set out, like what was the intent clear, and do we feel like it nailed it? And I feel like this game absolutely did that, despite the ambiguity of the narrative, and it still manages to like nail that like narrative focus. And despite like not having like concrete explanations for every single thing in the game, it nails that like innate like what's the word? Not reflex, but oh God, I'm so dumb. Now my lettuce is showing. Instinct. The instinct that like Celine would have from having like run this cycle so many times. Like it's just, and having that like innate understanding of all those things and concepts that the game doesn't force feed you. The intent is very clear, and it nails exactly what it's trying to do. And I think that like that is such a crucial marker of success. And I'm really glad that you have enlightened me to that way of thinking, because it's a very good way to look at games.
Yeah. And that's a great point to bring up, because I will say this just as like a caveat. If you're listening to this and have heard of Returnal as like primarily a roguelike, I'm not sure I would describe it that way. I think it's primarily a third-person narrative-driven shooter. It has roguelike elements, but if you're going into it expecting the kind of, you know, wacky sort of variability between runs and endless sort of gameplay that a roguelike can offer, you might find limitations there. You're playing this game primarily for the story, not for hundreds of hours of content like, you know, a roguelike might generally offer. Even if it has those elements, because that's not really its intent. It's trying to tell a story.
Yeah, and I agree. And like everything about this game, like the art design, the combat, the level design, like all the way down, like just to the little, like the consumables, everything is just so, nothing feels out of place in this game. It is just so tightly knit into this like perfect tapestry of like narrative and gameplay. Like they weave together so perfectly. So, and it's not often you get a game that's like that well received. Obviously it was pretty well received initially, but the sales margins were so low because it launched at a time the PlayStation was like at a devastatingly hard, I guess, point to get one. So
yeah, I'm looking it up right now, and there were six PS5s available at the time. And the six people that had them really liked this game.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know if there's much else to say about this game, because it is just like, I think we've hit all the key points, but like just play it. Like just go out there and get it. It's out on, you could probably pick this up for like $18 on PlayStation 5 if you have one. I know it's still probably 60.
Yeah, it's still a recent release on PC.
Yeah, but give it a couple weeks, and you might be able to get it on a sale or something like that. But it is a Sony first party coming to well, I guess technically not first party, but it is a PlayStation release on PC, so it might be some time before it hits that sale marker. But like all in all, like the value is there. Don't let the fact that it's, $20 on PlayStation and more expensive on PC like dissuade you from thinking that it isn't worth the money, because this game absolutely like kills it in terms of like value to dollar ratio. Like I said, I still come back to this game and I've beaten it like 3 times total. So
could not agree more. Well, Michael, I guess it's time for you to give us that post-game content sign-off that we look for.
Yeah. I don't want to run my spiel or bore anyone, so I'll just tell everyone. I know you were looking for something for me there, but I'm not going to give it to you.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
You don't deserve it.
I know you get off on being withholding.
Yeah, that's just what I tell Brittany to make her think I enjoy it, not ever getting it. So,
oh my god.
But no, I already beat this point to death. Join the Discord, talk to us, leave us a 5-star review. Check out the other shows on the 13 Palm Trees Network, and thank you to all of our generous patrons who have donated to the show that allow us to do things like giveaways and things like that. Like I said, we just gave away 2 brand new releases on the last month, so congrats to those winners, and we're looking forward to doing more things like that. So thank you to everyone, and thanks for everyone to checking out the episode. I'm excited we got around to doing this. So Max, no, you give us that sweet post games content sign off.
I had to stop myself from saying there's always Peng again. So
all right, bye.
Good night, everybody.